1. I've been out of the service industry for a while, but as I'm sure you all know, it leaves a mark on you. I was thinking about this story this morning and thought I'd share. My worst serving job was with a fine dining staffing agency. They illegally labeled us as contractors, which I was too young and naive to realize that meant their high hourly rate didn't make up the difference in what I ended up paying in taxes. It also meant that they didn't need to give us breaks or overtime. And this was a physically demanding job, even by serving standards. One of the managers would text us whenever gigs came in, and we would let her know if we could or couldn't work them. You had to be careful about turning down gigs, though, because the manager was petty and would stop sending you good gigs if you said no too often. One of my first gigs was a super early breakfast at some corporate office in downtown Dallas. We had to get there early to set up. They sent me an address and told me what time to be there. And so, when the time came, I got my butt out of bed and was rolling up to the building before the sun was up. However, once I got there, I couldn't find any parking. I circled the building several times and saw they had a parking garage, but it was gated and nobody was around. I pulled into a nearby parking lot to get my bearings. The lot I pulled into, as was the case for every nearby lot, was paid parking, and I wanted to avoid that if possible. I searched through my email and messages to see if there were any instructions about where to park, but there weren't. Finally, I gave up and decided to pay. Only my card wasn't in my wallet. Crap. I realized I had taken it out to buy something online the night before and hadn't put it away. No way was I getting my car towed over this. The money I'd make wouldn't remotely cover that. I called the only phone number I had, the communal cell phone that the owner and managers passed between them. I called it over and over, knowing that whoever was manning it must be asleep, but not knowing what else to do. I sent a few texts explaining the situation. As I did this, I went from being early to being on time to being late. Then I thought to myself, okay, the shift leader has definitely noticed that I haven't shown up by now. Maybe if I just sit tight for a minute, someone will get a hold of me. Time ticked on, and now I was ridiculously late. I tried calling the shared cell phone a couple more times, then figured, forget it. If it was important to them that I be at this gig, they should have made sure I knew where I needed to be, or at least given me the shift leader's info. I went home, which took at least 30 to 45 minutes in what was now rush hour traffic, and crawled back into bed. As I'm drifting off, my phone starts buzzing. I look over and see it's the manager's cell phone. I go to answer it, but then I realize that if I answer this call, I'm going to get reamed out and probably have to drive all the way back downtown to finish out the gig. I decide against it and roll over to go back to sleep. When I woke up, I texted something like, sorry, I went home and went back to sleep since I couldn't get a hold of anyone. I don't remember if they responded, but every time I got a gig after that, they sent an informative email about where to park, what door to use, what uniform to wear, etc. And I never missed another gig. I did, however, find a better job after only a few months at this place. At my last gig, the owner cornered me and questioned me about where I was going and why I needed a new job when I already had a good one. I later heard that she drove away from a gas station without removing the nozzle and had to pay for the damage she incurred. That's not related to this story. I just think it's really funny. 2. I worked at a cafe for just about 3 years that closed down in March due to COVID-19. Don't really want to go into too much detail about the circumstances of the job due to privacy reasons, but the cafe was only meant for the almost exclusively elderly members of a club. It was very intense because of the way the club was structured. We'd have nothing to do except prep and clean for several hours, then full-on D-Day for 30 minutes, and then back to nothing for several more hours. Anyway, here's an anecdote which has really given me a negative perception of elderly customers. I should mention most of the club members were not only elderly, but also very wealthy. One time, the club had been scheduled for only a handful of people on a Saturday, so I was going to be handling the place alone all day. This meant coming in at 7, making coffee and sandwiches for around 30 people, cleaning and prepping for the oncoming week. After about an hour of everything going smoothly, about 100 to 150 or so people emerge from one of the bigger activity rooms and a massive line forms. At this point, I panic because there is absolutely not enough sandwiches, coffee, or baked goods made or delivered to feed all these people. I ran out of about everything after 1/10 of the queue. I text my boss that there is an emergency of people and get to trying to quick fix the problem. I apologize to each of the customers and inform them of the circumstances, and I offer the option of one single sandwich that I can make really fast. Basically, you want a sandwich? Hold up your hand and let me count how many, and they will be done in 10 minutes. Some of them took it really well and even tipped me because they felt sorry for me. But oh my, the people who were dissatisfied were angry. First of all, whilst making the sandwiches, I had to endure yelling at the register and snide comments about how I don't know how to do my job properly.
Young people, am I right?
In the span of 10 minutes, I made about 60 or so of the sandwiches while having to smile at the customers yelling at me by the register, and went to deliver them. Here's the part that still gets me riled the frick up. One lady gets her sandwich and another says,
"Nicely done, idiot,"
in a way that in my language is obviously meant to refer to me as a dog. This, combined with the stress and anger, made me punch a concrete wall in the kitchen. So, because of faulty management in the club, we at the cafe hadn't received proper information about how many people were to be expected, and it all piled into a shit sandwich that I alone had to eat. Also, one customer had left a formal complaint about how the rude attendant at the register refused to make the sandwich of her choice, and had only offered her something that she did not want. At least my boss was understanding and knew I hadn't acted in a way I shouldn't. 3. A few months pre-pandemic, I was working at a place that had ridiculous specials on Thursday nights. I hated Thursday nights. Not only I was waiting rather than bartending, the money was awful. I made half the money I made other nights waiting, and 1/3 what I made bartending. The tables were invariably assholes on top of that. Thursdays brought mainly cheap students from the local university we never saw the rest of the week. On Thursday nights, service was invariably poor, morale was low, the kitchen was always overwhelmed and took forever. The cheap table of note that particular week was a table of Chinese grad students. Also worth noting in my locality, I could take a state-issued photo ID, a federally issued photo ID, or a passport as ID. After greeting them, I came back a few minutes later for drink orders. The first person ordered a beer. I asked for ID. I was presented with a picture of a guy and a wall of Chinese pictograms, no Roman characters. I had to respond, "Sorry, I can't take this. I can't read any of this. This could be your gym card for all I know." He grumbled about it and I didn't care. The second person ordered a beer. I asked for ID. She handed me her phone. It had a picture of the relevant bits of a Chinese passport. Once again, I had to deny. I have to physically see the passport. That could be someone else's passport. I'm sorry, I can't afford the fine. She looked at me with cat butt face, and I didn't care. The third person ordered a beer and handed me a Jamaican driver's license. Girlfriend had a thick Chinese accent. I was seriously confused. Nonetheless, I countered back, "I can't take this, no foreign IDs except for a passport. I apologize." She argued with me for a bit. I didn't care. The fourth person ordered a beer, and she handed me a green card. Now, technically this is a valid ID, but I had no idea what a green card is supposed to look like, so I told her exactly that. She asked for a manager. I took her ID over to my manager. I walked up to my boss, showed him the green card, and told him, "Yeah, so this is technically a valid ID, but I don't know what I'm looking at. I'm not taking it," and they're pissed. My boss responded, "So don't take it. I wouldn't take it either. I'll go talk to them in a bit." I returned to the table and told her the manager would be by shortly, and I am not accepting the ID. She was angry. I was over it. The fifth person ordered a beer and handed me, "What's this? Combo breaker." He had a valid My State driver's license. Well, wonders never cease. Much time has passed and I finally get to write a drink down on my little pad. The sixth person ordered a beer and handed me his ID. Now, he looked to be the youngest at the table, and the other birth dates I saw so far are 95 to 98. He handed me an Alabama ID with a 1982 birth date. Doubt! I straight up told him, "There is no way you're almost 40. I'm not taking this ID."
"I'm not almost 40.
He shot back, "I know. I ironically smiled back at him. He turned red and tried to argue while I lazily pondered if I could break his jaw in one punch. I decided I probably couldn't, as I had zero adrenaline pumping. The seventh person ordered a beer. He gave me his PLU, prestigious local university ID. I denied him.
"It's all I got,"
he pleaded. "Not my problem. I can't afford to get fined serving underagers." I deadpanned. He looked down in sadness while I dreamed about that first shot of Irish after work. The eighth person ordered water. I had to remind him that there was a glass of water in front of him. He greedily took a sip of water. I externally facepalmed. I couldn't help it. The ninth ordered a beer. We blinked at each other uncomfortably, since he didn't get the hint. I had to ask him for ID. He said he didn't have any. "No ID, no alcohol," I intoned as I mentally broke slightly. The table was staring daggers at me. At this point I was done with this table. They'd been there 20 minutes for a process that normally takes 10, max. Kitchen was closing 10 minutes, and they hadn't looked at the menu. Not to mention, this table was out of my section. My section was full, and everyone was just about done. I also had one drink going to a table I denied 7 IDs on. The table was angry at me, and almost definitely going to stiff me. I'd been at work 6 hours, done $1,000 plus in sales, which would have been much higher, maybe double on any other night with the same volume, and made $100 so far, before tip-out and lift. I decided to explode the table. I started my little speech. "Look guys, I'm really sorry, I can't serve you. It's not personal. I can't take the risk of getting several $1,000s in fines. I can't afford it. I apologize." I looked at the one guy who had ID. "That said, I don't feel comfortable serving you alcohol when I've had to deny 7 other people alcohol service. Maybe I could get you something else to drink." The table exploded as predicted. They started calling me racist and a jerk. They asked for my manager. I told my boss what was going down, and got them my boss. I went to the bar for a sneaky shot of power as it was time. I saw boss looking at their ID. I saw boss shrugging his shoulders. I saw them leaving. I was relieved. 4. This took place 8 days ago. I had a group of 10 come in. The UK's coronavirus rules mean tables of 6 are the maximum, but these guys came in as 2 groups of 5. Both groups were seated in my section, and I was warned that they seemed to know each other and to get help if I needed it. It was my 4th day. Before I'd even taken drinks orders, I saw a child from one table go and sit at the other. Yay. Being non-confrontational, I took both tables' drinks orders. When I went to get them, I told the manager about the child. I came back and started to take the food orders from one table. Both adults said they couldn't read and asked me to read the menu to them. After doing their orders, I went to take the other table's food orders, and they did the same thing. While I was reading the menu to them, their friends on the other table were shouting at me to get them some cutlery and sauces. After taking orders and getting cutlery, no thank yous whatsoever, I go complain to one of the other waiters who said, "They're going to try to get a discount for free food, so when you give them their food, make sure you check on them." At this point, I look up and all 4 adults are reading their phones. Didn't think any of you could. And completely ignoring their kids that are now laying in the middle of the floor. I bring them their food and nearly drop it all over one of the kids when he runs across my path. The only thing I saw any of the children being told off for. After all food is delivered, the parents continue to yell to each other, having loud conversations. Also currently illegal, as mingling between tables is a no-no. The same child that ran across me started climbing all over the furniture and banged his head. Parents stopped him crying and let him go back to it. I go over and tell them that he can't be up there, and if they don't get him down, I'll need to get my manager. They think I'm joking, and I go get her. Manager was too busy at that moment, and she had lots more tables to deal with at that point, so got one of the most experienced waiters to take her place in talking to these parents. When we get there, they deny everything, as does the other table who are their friends. I have no other tables that can back me up, and no cameras in that section. This is the point where all of the stress I've been experiencing from these people hit my limit. While my colleague was talking with them, I ran off into the staff area, as I could feel a panic attack coming. I start having my panic attack and then remember I need to let someone know I can't be out there at the moment and that someone needs to take over so they don't dash. Foreshadowing. Manager gets immediately concerned when she sees tears in my eyes. I explain the situation as best I can while barely able to speak. She tells me to go into the staff room and wait for her. Another manager walked into the restaurant around this time and is grabbed to go find Hazard. He found me and took me into the staff smoking area to get some fresh air. While I'm explaining what's happening, he's trying to calm me down and cheer me up with his own experiences of people like this. The first manager came out and said they had walked out. Managers offered to let me go home or stay and calm down. I stayed and they closed my section. Over the next hour, I cleaned the bomb site these people left and sent photos of it to family because how the fuck do you make that much mess? To give me something to do to take my mind off it. Felt I was good again, so told manager I can go back to work. She said to shadow another waiter instead of retaking my section so that I can get my confidence back. I am a shy and introverted guy who has very little confidence talking to people, and all my confidence just got removed. My managers and the other waiters and chefs were amazing in this situation. Now here's the part that happened the next day that I found very funny. I was about to take a dessert order for a table, and one of the other waiters grabs me and just says, "Go into the kitchen, now!" I go in and I'm told one of these people has come in. In the UK, all restaurants need to use track and trace in which guests have to give their name and phone numbers, so that in the event of a local outbreak, everyone can be told to isolate. When they dashed, my manager gave this info on them to the police, who gave them a call and said, "You should probably go pay or we'll come arrest you." He still tried to protest that I was rude and abusive to them, but ended up paying in full. 5. Working in customer service definitely has its moments. In fact, I get them pretty much every shift. This isn't the first time someone has gotten mad at me for this same situation either. I work at Tim Hortons, and just a couple weeks ago, they started requiring us to take the name and number of any customer who sits in the dining room, just in case they get a tip that a customer has to get tested or has tested positive. Where I live, COVID isn't as much of an issue because we're such a small province, and I guess we've been taking the necessary precautions to prevent cases. I believe we only have 2 active cases right now, but I could be wrong. Regardless, we're only recently required to do this within the past few weeks. Most people have been understanding and cooperating with us, though one regular saw notice about it and did give me a hard time, even though I never asked him for his information since he wasn't sitting in the dining room, and never does anyway, so he didn't have to worry about it. On one hand, I guess I can understand how people don't want to have us take their personal info, but on the other, it's not like we're using it for anything other than contacting them should they need to be notified that another customer who was there at the same time has ended up testing positive for COVID. It's simply to take precautions and prevent the spread. If a customer refuses, then we can't force them, but so far, there hasn't been a single customer who's refused, and hasn't also made a scene or given us a hard time about it, and it's so unnecessary. I was just so pissed off about what this particular customer said to me today that I had to share this story somewhere to help me get over my anger. Anyway, I was told to go into the dining room and collect people's info, and as usual, when asked, I wanted to die, because then I have to deal with rude customers. But I take the info sheet and walk out to a table with 2 old people who are also regulars. They give me their info, and the old man even makes a joke with me, and I'm happy that they don't make a scene. But then I turn around and this customer is looking at me, saying something, but he's speaking so low I can't hear him. So I walk up to him and he's like, "You have to take my info too?" So I ask him if his has been taken, and he says no, but doesn't say anything after that. So there's a moment of silence before I say, "I just need a name and number then." But apparently that's not what he was saying to me when he mumbled in my direction when I was on the other side of the dining room. And this just sets him off. He starts swearing at me and asking if the government put me up to this. And I'm just standing there thinking, what the fuck is going on right now? Anyway, he goes off about that, saying how he's only sitting down to enjoy his coffee, so it's unnecessary that I take his info. When I didn't intend on walking up to him in the first place, since I was only told to take the info of the old people. So I assumed someone else had already gotten his and I didn't need to. If he hadn't said anything, I wouldn't have approached him, because he was the one who made me bother him. He only called me over just to yell at me, to be honest. Then he asked me how long this has been in effect. I told him a couple of weeks because it has been. Why would I feel the need to lie about that? Then he's like, well, I've been coming here for the past few weeks and nobody's tried to take my fucking information. So at that point, I just kind of give him this look like I'm fucking done with this conversation. Like, okay, if no one has done that, it's not my problem. I haven't seen this guy once in the past few weeks, so chances are he came in when I wasn't working. So I really don't understand why he's getting mad at me if no one tried to take his info. Besides, it's not like he would have given them his info anyway based on the way he was acting in that moment. Like I said, maybe he thought I was lying about it since that was the first time he'd ever been asked for his info, even though it's been a thing for the past few weeks. At that point, I just shrug and tell him, well, I can't force you to do anything if you refuse to give me your info. And he's like, yeah, you can. Okay, that's what I just said. Why do you feel the need to have the last word here? Then he's like, maybe you should put your info on that sheet. Not sure what that would accomplish, but there's no point in me putting down my info. If I'm punched in and they know when I worked, they can contact me at any point. If some customer ends up having Rona and I was working at the time they were there, or something, but I just walk away after that and go back behind the counter, because I wasn't sticking around to hear any more of his bull. By the time I've closed the employee door, he calls out to me and says something else, but I couldn't be bothered to care, and it's not like I could hear what he said anyway. I just ignore him and go back to serving customers, and that was the end of it. He probably would have kept going had I not chosen to ignore him and walk away, especially since he kept trying to speak to me after I had already walked away. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Spinning Plates, episode 119. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Oh joy, I was just recording my first attempt at the outro there, and I heard the letterbox just kind of chap solidly once. For a second I thought the evil was coming to get me, playing too many spooky games I have. Then I realized, no, the letterbox has been broken for years, and we're getting to the point in the year now where the wind is bad enough to actually lift up the letterbox. So I'm just going to have to learn to ignore that again. Oh joy. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.